Hello, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday. It is June 23rd. I appreciate you joining us. Of course, on the program today, Alec, Busse from thehoosier.com. Zach Osterman will join us as well. And I think we even have Bob Kravitz on the program today. So we'll get a chance to talk about last night's NBA draft. Jalen Hood-Schifino of the Indiana Hoosiers taking 17th. Trace Jackson Davis, 57th. Of course, Victor Wembanyama goes number one. I saw a stat on him. He was the first non-freshman, I think, in 3 years or something like that. But no shock there with Victor going first. Now, and no changes. There was thought that some things could happen with trades at the top. Nothing changed there with, I think, Scoot Henderson going 2 and Brandon Miller going 3rd. So there was nothing doing there. The Pacers actually traded down a spot from 7th to 8th to do some trades, all that funky stuff they do. But that's how it goes. Indiana football in the Final Five for Tremar Harris, a dynamic wide receiver. So that's good for them. But look forward to talking to Zach and Bob about last night's draft and Alec as well to check in on recruiting. Of course, John, the producer, is off today. But I hope you're doing well and having a great start to your Friday as it's weekend time. Time for the weekend. Jalen Hood-Schifino, very, very happy. Last night, I saw a clip of him. Well, of course, I saw that one live, but Trace Jackson Davis not happy with those that passed on him, I guess I'll say. The Pacers passed on him twice. I think they had the 47th pick and the 55th pick and passed on him, and he sent out a tweet at that time saying something that you will regret it or something like that. And I'm like, those are the things I wish he wouldn't do, because that harkens back to sending this letter thing last year. Just do it on the floor, man. Show it. Don't write it. But anyway, he has nothing to be ashamed of if that's the reason he feels compelled to put that out. Just go, man. You got drafted in the NBA, and a lot of people didn't. So, but the best of luck to him. Best of luck to Jalen Hood-Schifino as he'll start his career on the sunny coast of Southern California, Los Angeles. And with LeBron James. How about that? Now, I'm pretty certain that he knows LeBron James from his son Bronny and the circuit down through there. But that'll be the second Hoosier in a row that actually, former Hoosier, that will, and in back-to-back seasons, playing on the Lakers with LeBron, as Thomas Bryant was traded from the Lakers to Denver so he could pick up an NBA ring. But plenty with that. So we don't have to talk about the draft or predict that anymore. Now we get to wait and watch some great summer TV, which is the NBA Summer League that will begin out in Las Vegas. I'll have to check to see when that starts. But now this is for the guys who, like Trace Jackson Davis, instead of sending out that tweet, do it in Las Vegas, man. Just do it, because now he just sets himself up to, you set yourself up when you do that. So I hope it all goes well for him. Welcome aboard. Appreciate you being here as always. Of course, we're brought to you by the great folks from Andy Mora Honda. Just go to andymorehonda.com to get more to your door for the best in new and used vehicles. And, of course, Endeavor Hospitality and the family of restaurants in and around the Bloomington area. Great places like the Chop Shop, located right where in the same location as BB's Market, where you can do two things at once. You can get the great steak meal and do some shopping as well. The best of custom meats and in-house made products around. So make sure you stop by there as well. Looking forward to talking to Alec Busse later on today here in this first hour. Also Bob Kravitz as well. So we'll get to talk. And then Zach Osterman. So we'll get to touch on the draft, how it impacts Indiana, how it impacts the teams that they've gone to. Your thoughts on it as well. Thanks for those hitting us up on the Andy Moore Honda hotline. We appreciate you as well already. Fred, Kent, Bob, Dwayne, Five Lefts, Andrew, and John from all over the place. Whether you're in the state of Indiana, or this listening via YouTube or podcast somewhere around this great world, we appreciate you. If you have any comments, throw them along. We'll try to get to them, especially when our friends join us here in a little bit. Jalen Hutchefino picked about where we thought he would be, right? Anywhere from that 12th on right there, just inside or just outside of the lottery area, which I think is the top 14 picks. At number 17, so he's still going to be very, very happy. And I saw an interview with his mom and his sister. He was wearing a very festive green suit. I'm not sure if that was green for money. I saw Coach Mike Woodson, Indiana coach Woody there at the draft as well. A great statement for Indiana, of course. Great a help for future recruiting, as I wonder how many kids are watching that, recruits are watching that stuff. Are they watching the draft? Yeah, they probably are. Derek says that TJD doesn't need to be upset that the Pacers passed on him. Dustin Empiric tweeted last night the Pacers were not a good fit since they already had two backup fives that have a hard time getting minutes. And that's a perfect point. Thank you, Derek. And it's another reason why, just for his sake, I just don't do that stuff, man. You're setting yourself up by doing that. Just accept the grace of the fact that he was drafted. Bam, move on with it. Prove your point in Las Vegas, and then say, I told you so. But, oh well, the best of luck to him. And we'll get to see him play in Las Vegas as that gets going. That probably starts in July, I believe, sometime. But, yeah, I agree. And then we'll talk to Zach Osterman when he comes on with us. Zach had a tweet that landing where he actually ended up Golden State, right? I think I said Washington by mistake. But that it was a good landing spot for him. July 7th, thanks, Derek, on the NBA Summer League starting up in Las Vegas. So looking forward to that getting started just around the corner. But it's a good point because Zach Osterman mentioned in a tweet that this was probably a good landing spot for Trace Jackson Davis. And we will see. But we'll talk to Zach about that. And it is about fits. And because your goal is to make the roster. And if you have a team that the offense is not conducive to your style of play, probably not going to be the best opportunity for you to make that final roster. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. Alec Busse will join us, and we'll talk about that and much more in regards to last night's draft, what's going on with recruiting, and many other things. Back with more Indiana Sports Beat right after this. I'm doing this on my own today, bro.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I have to time my commercials, and I'm like, God dang, I hate it. Hate it, hate it. I hate being alone because I'm like, there's 50 things to do, and I'm like trying to think of what I'm saying. And
Where's John at?
Huh?
Where's John at?
He's has to do the station where he works through. He has to do something he couldn't get out of.
I gotcha.
So I just have to 3 minutes in between.
Sounds good.
And then I brought you in early anyway, since it was just, I looked up and I'm like, oh, he's there. So better than just listening to me talk.
Hey, it's a lot easier to do a show with two people than one person. I always respect the people who have radio shows and do them all by themselves. I always feel like that's tough.
It's tough when John's here. So
no, Andrew, I'm not a Reds fan.
No, Alec's not a Reds fan.
I'm a Cardinal fan, and you can crap on my team all you want. We deserve it.
I was going to say he's probably a Cardinals fan. Well, the Reds did not. I didn't mention that. The Reds didn't win last night.
Oh, did they lose? So the streak's over?
No. They just didn't win. They didn't play.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They're at 11 straight, right?
Huh?
They've won 11 straight, right?
Yeah. Rolling, baby.
The NL Central is so bad.
Not as bad as the AL Central.
That is true. I don't pay attention.
Just barely not as bad.
I don't pay attention to baseball as much as I used to. And it really makes me sad. It's just so hard. I feel like, Jim, when you're so like invested in college basketball and college football, like we are, to like really dive into another sport that heavily and like really follow it and really like have a high level of knowledge.
That one's tough too, because it's always changing.
Yes. And baseball also, like, it's not on national TV, even like it was when I was a kid. I mean, it is like Sunday Night Baseball. You got the Fox game on Saturday, but like, it's not like the NFL where every game is on Fox and CBS.
All right, we've got less than, or it's 15 seconds. 10. 5 seconds. Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you here on this Friday, June 23rd. We're 2 days into summer and 1 day post-NBA draft for 2023. Welcome in Alec Busse from thehoosier.com. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, guys. How you doing this morning?
Cannot complain because nobody wants to listen to it. But good things for a lot of people last night. Jalen Hood-Schifino taken number 17 by the Los Angeles Lakers. Mentioned that he'll second year in a row that there will be a former Hoosier playing with LeBron James. But I doesn't he know Bronny from the days playing in that circuit? I think I'm not sure if there's enough crossover there. But Trey Jackson-Davis taken 57th. He's at Golden State. And first of all, Jalen Schifino that's kind of in the area where we thought he was going to go anywhere from 12th to this right inside or right outside of the lottery picks. Trey Jackson-Davis not happy about his pick, sending out a tweet that you will regret it, which I mentioned before you joined us. I wish he wouldn't do that because. Well, I don't care. Do whatever he wants. But he said when you do that, you set yourself up to look bad. Just go prove it on go to Las Vegas, show that you should have been they should have taken you or make them feel bad or whatever. That's how you do it. You don't do it by doing that. Last year he sent out this letter and I'm like, wow, that just seems a little immature to me. And here it was again. It's like, stop with this stuff, man. But anyway, he gets selected 57th, but Jalen Hood-Schifino looking in good shape with the Lakers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really cool. Like a lot of these kids, right? Like I'm 23 years old. Like I would imagine that Jalen Hood-Schifino is a lot like me and kind of grew up with LeBron James as one of his basketball idols. Maybe not his favorite player growing up, but I would imagine that he was like a player that he grew up idolizing in some fashion. So I think to be drafted by the Lakers and know that you're going to go play with LeBron James has to be like the most eye-opening or like surreal feeling ever. Like, you get drafted and that's an incredible feeling and that's awesome, right? But then like to go and play with LeBron James, who is like arguably the greatest basketball player to ever live, has to just be like such a unique and such a cool experience. And to see that name pop up on your phone at some point, if you're Jalen Hood-Schifino, and call you and congratulate you and welcome you to the organization has to just be such a unique feeling and something that very few people probably understand and probably can even relate to. And also, like, I think it's a pretty decent fit for him in Los Angeles. Obviously, he's a point guard and he's maybe best when he's on the ball. But I also think that Jalen Hood-Schifino showed a lot in his freshman year at Indiana that he can play off the ball, which is something he's probably going to have to do a lot in Los Angeles because LeBron James is on the team. And at this point in LeBron's career, he plays on the ball a lot because that's when he's at his best as a playmaker and passer to, a lot of his teammates and setting up his teammates for open looks. And the Lakers obviously have a little bit of a need at point guard. So I think that's a great fit for Jalen Hood-Schifino. And like I said, I just think the emotions of being drafted by the Lakers, I mean, they're one of the greatest franchises ever. The coolness factor of being drafted by the Lakers, Southern California, Los Angeles, is incredible in of itself. But then you add in the LeBron James factor, and I don't know if there's a cooler team to be drafted by in the NBA than the Lakers. And congratulations to Jalen Hood-Schifino for being able to accomplish a lifelong dream of being drafted into the NBA.
Yeah, the Lakers, the Celtics. I mean, you're talking just two of the greatest sports franchises there are, period. Absolutely, I agree with that. And you think of the Lakers, you think of Magic, and you think of Showtime, and Magic Johnson is probably somebody he talked to last night or will be talking to in the coming days, without question. And again, Jerry West, all these great names that the history, the pantheon of professional basketball. But yeah, great to see him land there and look forward. Now, I'm wondering if we'll get to see much of him in Las Vegas. Will he play in the summer league? How much will he play in the summer league if he does? Not sure if that where he drafting as high as he did will how much time he'll play out there.
Yeah, I'd imagine he plays out there some. I mean, even Victor Wembanyama has said that he's going to play a little bit in the summer league. And if Wemby is going to play, I can promise you Jalen Hood-Schifino is probably going to play too.
Yeah.
And this is no like insult to Schifino, right? But he's not the level of prospect that Wemby is as a player. So I would imagine Hood-Schifino gets some run out there out west in the summer league. And I would imagine that he does play a good bit and then probably does get shut down once they kind of see what they want to see from him. And I mean, clearly the Lakers like him as a prospect. And I've seen some quotes this morning from different people in the organization saying positive things about how impressed they were in his workouts and in his interviews with just his overall maturity, his poise as a player on tape. And I even saw one this morning talking about how impressed they were in his ability to kind of really commit to his diet and really commit to his physical, appearance, you could say, with working out and being in shape. And like I said, the diet, all those things kind of go together. And you can only go as far as your body takes you. And he's obviously taking really good care of it. And we all saw the social media hit with Chipotle, where he's talking about how he doesn't put meat in his Chipotle bowls because he's a vegetarian. And he started that a couple years ago. So for a kid who's 19, 20 years old at this point to already be committing himself to a diet, I think is a really good example of the commitment that Jalen Hood-Schifino has to finding success and elevating himself to a level where he gives himself the best opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. And as far as recruiting, this helps Indiana University or whatever team you have when you have guys that get drafted in the first round of the NBA draft. Of course, saw Mike Woodson there with Jalen Hood-Schifino last night, along with his mom and his sister and some other family members. But the recruits are watching this. I'm pretty sure recruits watch the draft, not to watch Jalen Hood-Schifino, but just they watch the draft, and that their dream has started of being in that position, whether it's a year from now or 2 years from now. People like Mackenzie Mbako, those guys, they want to be there, man.
Yeah, and even if they aren't watching the draft, right? Like Indiana can still say, hey, like we turned this kid into an NBA draft pick. And I also think it helps Indiana because if you think back to before Jalen Hood-Schifino's freshman year, he wasn't even a kid who was realistically on draft boards, let alone hovering around the lottery. So Indiana can really sell it. And it's something that they're definitely using. It's something that I've heard a lot of players of similar position, whether that's Dylan Harper or Boogie Flan, talk a lot about how they've developed Jalen Hood-Schifino and how impressive that was to him and how they turned him into a first-round NBA draft pick. And I think that's something that you see around the country. I mean, the best example of it is probably Kentucky, right? Like, think about how many draft picks John Calipari's produced out of UK since he started there. And even though the success on the court hasn't been as great for UK in the last couple of years, like he still had a first-round pick last night, and he had one go late in the second round with the last pick of Chris Livingston. And we know that Kentucky is going to continue to produce talent given the recruiting class they have coming in. And, you know, Jim, like the best way to find success on a college basketball court, aside from being experienced because of the COVID year and the transfer portal and everything else, is simply just have NBA talent. I mean, like even UConn, right? Like Jordan Hawkins was a first round pick last night, and it's hard to find success in college basketball if you don't have NBA players on your roster. And UConn had two because both of them got drafted last night, and Adama Sanogo signed as an undrafted free agent about the minute the draft ended by the Chicago Bulls.
Absolutely. Let's see. Speaking of recruiting, anything going on in that area? It's a quiet time. Well, actually, first of all, I want to ask you, it's looking to me more and more like Indiana may actually end up leaving a scholarship open.
Yeah, I actually wrote that yesterday in a thing that I do every Thursday called Thursday Takes on the website at thehoosier.com. And I do think that last scholarship is probably going to end up being left open. We saw them miss on Joey Hart. He's obviously going to Kentucky, committed there last Saturday. And then earlier this week, it's reported that Antonio Reeves is actually going to stay at Kentucky, despite a lot of rumors that he was going to enter the transfer portal. So I do think that last scholarship is going to stay open. And I think that that's okay. A lot of schools leave a scholarship open, and a little bit further, like I think Trey Galloway has earned the opportunity to start for Indiana this upcoming season. And I also think that if you brought in an additional piece that you weren't, 100% confident was going to make your roster that much better, that was going to raise your floor that much, raise your ceiling by a noticeable amount, then you're just kind of blocking young players and making it harder for them to get on the floor and potentially opening the door up for them to make it easier to decide to enter the transfer portal at some point after their freshman year, or heck, even during their freshman year, because they can do it then as well. So I actually am not surprised that Indiana's leaving that last scholarship open. I think that Trey Galloway is more than capable of playing an effective 2/3 guard spot. I think Ja'Kai Newton and Gabe Cupps can both take that role a little bit as well. And we'll have to see if CJ Gunn is capable of doing that, because he only played 4 or 5 minutes a game last year. So we'll be interested to see if that kind of is something that materializes for Indiana this upcoming year. But I'm not surprised that they're leaving it open. And there's no reason adding a 13th body if that 13th body you don't feel like is going to be able to contribute in a noticeable way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason to fill it just to fill the spot, especially if it's not it has to be the right fit, because you're not going to give up a scholarship that you don't have control over. I understand they would rather have that scholarship go empty now as opposed to fill it and not have control over that scholarship next year, making sure that it has a fit going forward, because this team is going to be different next season than it's going to be this upcoming season, which that's hard to say, but that's just the facts of life now with that. Any movement in recruiting? Indiana had a flush of visits there, and then things have kind of slowed down right now because it's in a transition. between there are live evaluation periods about to open up, I believe, correct?
Yeah, there's a live evaluation period this weekend. I would say the biggest development this week in Indiana recruiting would be Flory Badunga going to Duke for an official visit. He received a scholarship offer from the Blue Devils this week while he was down there. He tweeted that out. Came after a conversation with John Shire, it appears, according to his Twitter. We know Duke's a school that's kind of gotten involved with Flory Badunga here in the last couple of weeks. I believe that was after the Pangos camp that Duke kind of started to express some interest. Quickly sets up an official visit for the top 5 ranked recruit in the 2024 class. And I was got a scholarship offer from Duke. So I would say that that's probably the biggest development for Indiana in terms of the recruiting front this past week. And, you know, if you're going to recruit top 5 players, you're going to have to fight and you're going to have to beat the Dukes, the Kansases for those types of players. And Indiana beat Kansas for a top 10 recruit just a couple of weeks or a couple of months ago, I guess I should say at this point, for Mackenzie Mbako. And like I said earlier, where you want players who are going to be in the NBA, right? And if you want those players, a lot of times those are the highest ranked players in the class. So Indiana's fighting for those, and we'll see where things kind of go for Flory Badunga. He's recently taken official visits to, I guess, Duke, Michigan, and KU now. And I know Indiana's trying to set one up, but we'll end up seeing if that ends up coming to fruition for them.
Yeah, I was. I think I heard that they expected to get him in for another visit, and that should be a lot easier since he is in the state as opposed to being further away and out of state. So, and of course, like anything else, you want to be the last. I mean, for me, I always want to be you want to have the last word. You want to have the last visit. You want to, whatever it is, because you hope that you can leave the most positive things last in someone's mind. But that's going to be an interesting recruiting there because Duke getting involved so late but having such an impact, which is not shocking because we've seen that happen before. But I didn't know I expected that from Flory Badunga, but I didn't know he was such a huge Duke fan until we found out that he was. I didn't realize that he was really a fan of anyone because of his late start to the game of basketball.
Yeah, I think that I don't know a ton about his personal relationship with Duke before the recruitment from Duke kind of started, but what I've kind of read and kind of heard is that he was able to watch Duke on TV before he came over to the United States to start playing. And maybe that has something to do with it, where Duke was on TV, so he's able to watch him a little bit more. You kind of hear about that a lot with baseball, right? Like so many players that come from Latin America, whether it's like the Dominican Republic or like Puerto Rico, a lot of them are Yankees fans because Yankees are on TV all the time, right? So they were able to kind of watch the Yankees. I don't know if it was a similar situation for Flory Badunga growing up, but certainly Duke is someone that he views in high regard, and he quickly agreed to take an official visit there, and he seems very excited about the scholarship offer he got from Duke. And when I talked to him last week, he talked about how excited he was to go down there for an official visit and how his relationship with John Shire has started to build, and a whole bunch of other different things. And then we know how successful Duke has been in terms of producing NBA talent, and then also all the tools that are there for players to be successful when they're at Duke. Not that Indiana doesn't have a lot of those same tools, but the whole brotherhood thing that Duke always talks about, right?
But here's the thing: we talk about looking at people looking at, say, Mike Woodson and his connections, the NBA, his long time he coached, he played. John Shire does not offer that. John Shire has not put a single player. Well, I mean, I guess in a year they probably had someone leave, but that wasn't his recruits. So it's still Duke, but John Shire is the coach. He hasn't done anything. He hasn't won anything at Duke. He hasn't. So it's the brand that Flory Badunga likes for sure, but it sure seems that most of the time players go play for coaches.
Yeah, I would counter that Shire probably did recruit and does get most of the credit for Derek Lively, who was drafted last night in the lottery by the Mavericks. And then Dariq Whitehead, he also took the lead on as well, who was drafted, I believe, in the first round, later part of the first round. And I think that this is kind of like an interesting time for Duke basketball. Like, you make a really interesting point because Coach K is not there anymore. So the program overall, right, like is kind of in a little bit of a new phase. It has a little bit of a new identity, but it's still Duke, right? Like I think we're all kind of trying to figure out what is Duke going to be in 3, 4, 5 years as far as a basketball program? Are they still going to have that same kind of mystique, that same aura around them, that same coolness factor to recruits that allows them to get high-level players? And if you look at the players that they have committed, right, like it looks like they're still going to have that, at least for the immediate future, because they're having success on the recruiting trail in 24 and 25. So I'm very interested to see how it kind of goes. Duke obviously struggled for a lot of last season. A lot of that had to do with injuries. Speaking specifically on the court, I mean, Drake Whitehead missed a lot of the season. Derek Lively missed parts of the last season. But once they got healthy, right, like they were pretty good at the end of last season. A lot of people were picking them to come out of their region in the NCAA tournament before they lost to Tennessee in the round of 32, I believe that would have been. So I'm very intrigued to see where it goes for Duke in the future. And I'm someone who believes in John Shire. I'm someone who believes in the investment and the alignment that Duke's administration has for the basketball program still being successful. But it's certainly going to be different at Duke for the next, however many years, because Coach K is not there, and he was there since the 70s, long before I was born.
That's right, Cons. What's up next for folks at the Hoosier.com?
Yeah, it is a super busy weekend for Indiana football recruiting, which I know doesn't always get as much attention as basketball, but they're hosting about 15 official visitors this weekend, so you might want to check something out on that. We're putting a piece up previewing all 15 official visitors, and then we're also running a promo right now on the website that I'm going to post today, so people can go check out a promo and get a, free or reduced price subscription for at least a good amount of time, and hopefully you like us. Hopefully you like some of the content that we're producing. Hopefully you like some of the insight that's going up on the message boards, all those different things, because we think we do a good job, and we like the content that we're producing and everything else. So make sure to check us out, guys.
Absolutely. Alec and Mason and the whole group. Make sure you check it out. Alec, thanks a lot, brother. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks for letting me hop on. Hopefully you got some good weather up there in Indiana this weekend. Excited to move.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Alec Busse from thehoosier.com joining us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. We've got more coming back. Bob Kravitz joins us. Zach Osterman a little later as well. Back with more right after this. Quiet when it's just me, people. Thank you, Michael. It's not easy. Oh, the Reds and the Braves start tonight. Thank you. Well, you know what, though? Better check this. Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you here on this Friday. I hope you had a great week. And if not, it's over, so you don't have to worry about it. It's time for the weekend. Looking forward to Bob Kravitz joining us here in a little bit. Zach Osterman all along a little later. Of course, last night, the NBA draft taking place. Indiana Hoosiers getting a couple guys drafted there with Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trey Jackson-Davis in the first and the second round. Hoping to talk to Bob Kravitz here shortly, as he should be set to join us soon. And we'll get his take on how that went down and the fits between the teams where each of these guys ended up. Schifino with the Lakers and Trace Jackson-Davis with Golden State. Jackson-Davis is going to have to prove his wear in the Summer League, the NBA Summer League, and make that roster. And that is not always the easiest of things to do, because you're playing against guys who are fighting for their life. But there's also guys on some of these rosters already that are going to be fighting for their lives as well. So not are you playing against the new guys, it's some of the guys in existence who are also fighting for their lives. Former Hoosier Romeo Langford plays for the San Antonio Spurs, who picked up the number 1 overall pick last night in Victor Wembanyama, and who's mentioned by Alec Busse that he plans to play in the Summer League. So, man, there's some fun stuff coming up that we'll get to watch. The NBA Summer League is become very entertaining. You've got the TBT that will be starting. So we've got that going on as well. So a lot of hoops still to get through here in the summertime. Looking forward to it. So happy about getting that stuff going. The TBT, that's comes up here in a couple weeks as well, I guess. The Reds did not lose last night, but that's because they didn't play. They didn't win, but they didn't lose. But someone just pointed out they start that series with the Braves tonight, a big series, because, well, they've won 11 straight, and now they're taking on the I'm assuming that they're leading their division over there. But this is last year the Reds shocked all of us to start the season with a series win over the Braves to start the year. Hope that they can keep it rolling. I can't imagine that it goes from 11 to 14, but we'll see. Who knows? That would be that would be incredible. But we'll see how that happens. How is your day going? What are you planning for the weekend? Looks like to be a good weekend just to relax. The Braves have won 8 in a row as well. Wow, a clash of 2 Titans. Kevin points out. Thank you very much. Those might be the 2 winningest teams in baseball right now. Of course, the Reds, that is a major league best, 11 straight wins. But the Braves, right behind them, it's going to be a fun weekend to watch this young talent that the Reds have go up against this Braves team. As Alec Busse mentioned, Indiana football with a ton of recruits in over the weekend, this weekend. So that's very important for them. And I mentioned earlier, they're in the final five for Jamar Harris, who is a pretty daggone good wide receiver. I was a little surprised to see that. Michigan State, Purdue, Cincinnati, among the others that are in that. So we'll see how that turns out as well. The College World Series happening as well. I think that is finally down to the championship now. As who won last night? I was trying to watch a game last night, and I was out, and person next to me just kept talking, and I should have just got up and walked away, but it was another great game. This one was zeros in as they went into extra innings between Wake Forest and oh my goodness, drawing a blank, but I'll have it in a second. LSU, yeah, who have played like 4 times. They played their own series here of late, it seems like. The Lakers prioritized their future with Jalen Hood-Schifino. Did you see the green suit that he wore? Nice little green suit. But yeah, I didn't see the end of that game last night, and I hate that. But because I was trying to watch it, and I couldn't get this guy to. I should have just. All he wanted to talk about was himself, which is great. But I just wanted to watch the game, and I still did not end up seeing who won that. But looking forward to, I think that it starts today, doesn't it? So College World Series pick back up with the championship moves to a best 2 out of 3 as well. Kind of a clean slate. Number 1 team has not won the College World Series since 1991, FYI. That was, I think I've said it, Miami was the last team to do that, to accomplish that feat. And then when you watch this College World Series, you understand that the pitching, oh man, these upper level teams, that's the difference. When you think of the teams in the Big Ten, they don't have this level of pitching. Well, there you go, Florida and LSU. So Wake Forest, again, was the number 1 team, so the streak continues. The number 1 team will not win again. Florida is number 2, I believe. So LSU became, here we go, Rudy with the big info. LSU became the first team to hand Wake Forest consecutive losses. There you go. Wake Forest was number 1. The Tigers had won 5-2 on Wednesday, set up at second. Yeah, they played a bunch. But this Florida team, man, they're really, really good. They have not lost a game at the College World Series. So fortunately, we'll get to have K-Bro on again next week, hopefully, and talk more about that as Kevin is out in Omaha, covering the Gators for the Gainesville Sun. So looking forward to talking to him again about that. But man, he's got the full experience. I don't think he's ever been that in one place that long in his life, except for he lives. He's been in Omaha for almost 2 weeks, but just great fun watching this College World Series. That's going to continue. Oh, you guys are talking about various things there. So, and I think game 1 is, do they have game 1 tonight? Starting at 7, I believe, in the College World Series. I believe that is correct, but I do not want to give incorrect information. Yeah, LSU won yesterday 2-0 in extras. That was the final in 11 innings. So I didn't get to see the end of it, thank goodness, or unfortunately. But the championship series, when does that start? Well, I'm going to go with tonight, but walk off. Wow. So I got to miss that. It starts Saturday. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you. So they give him a day off. I wonder how that affects Florida. Man, they've been sitting around. Probably it's to their benefit. Get to rest their pitchers. I would think that that would be an advantage for them. We'll see. What do you think between the Reds and the Braves? I think the Reds, well, I'm just guessing that would just be a little. This is the only place where Major League Baseball, I don't have to worry about not being I am a Reds fan. So hopefully they can pull that series out and continue their winning ways. But that winning 11 games straight is big time no matter what, especially for that team, for the youth, just getting Joey Votto back. But if they can continue the winning, they don't have to obviously keep the streak going. But if they could, that would be fantastic. But winning that series would still send a message that they're for real. And it would send a message to themselves that they're for real. So we'll look forward to see how that goes. Still waiting to see if Bob's going to check in with us. If not, maybe he's taking another day off, which he deserves another day off. And then Zach Osterman will be with us a little later, as I mentioned. We'll get back to talking about the draft last night, the impact. What will the Big Ten look like next year? You've got Indiana's going to have a completely different team. Illinois is going to be different. Purdue is going to be, and Michigan State are going to be pretty much the same, but a little bit better. We're starting to eke into college football. Yesterday received a notification for Big Ten football media days, which are coming up July 25th and 26th. I'm like, are you serious? Why can't we wait till August to do that? The season doesn't start till September. But Big Ten football media days coming up July 25th and 26th. Speaking of which, coming up July 20th at the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Do not forget that. Never lose hope. And without my man JTP here, I may not be able to pop that link up today, but Google Never Lose Hoop, and that's Hoop, H-O-O-P. Play on words there. Never Lose Hoop golf outing. Go to golfstatus.com. You should be able to find that. There's a place to register. If you want to be a sponsor, you can do that. But get your team in. It's going to be a fun event. Of course, this is the Hulls Foundation, and it benefits area kids with cancer and their families and the impact on them. Should be a very, very fun event. Expecting a big IU athletics showing. I think Woody is planning on playing. Well, I got right here. So it should be a great day out there. That link, just go to events.golfstatus.com and you should be able to find that. If not, we'll have that link up when John comes back. Bobby says in California, you don't even need to get paid. You can just go into a store and take whatever you want if you can find a store that has it closed down. Oh, that doesn't sound fun. Fred said he was surprised that Jett Howard went so early. Now I kept seeing it. The reports that he was going to go. That was surprising, but I wasn't after I saw where he was listed for so long. Andrew Jones says the Reds are young and impressive. Youthful enthusiasm is contagious. Yes, it is. Fan base energized. It should be exciting series. Absolutely. They had close to 30,000 for the Rockies during a midweek. This could really get up to 40,000. I mean, it's not been like that in Cincinnati for a long, long time. I agree. Man, we've got all kinds. We're bouncing all over the place today. Kevin says that it's bad for the PGA to link up with Live Golf. A bad move. I think it is as well, but nobody cares what I think. I can't disagree with you more. Chris hitting us up on the Andy Moore Honda hotline as well. Says next year basketball will be a whole new offense and defense, new look, and nobody knows it this time. Well, there's that. He's talking about Indiana University. Yeah, they'll certainly be different. But I was talking about Never Lose Hoop. July 20th. Don't forget. Get yourself a team. You get box lunch. You get dinner. It's just going to be great golf, fun. Hopefully it's a beautiful day. I think we've got that ordered. And don't forget, before I do, if you're looking for a home in the Indianapolis area, make sure you need Cheryl Sizemore and her 2 decades of experience. It could be the difference between you getting the home you want or not. Reach out to her, Cheryl, in the homepros.com. Greatly appreciate her and her support, as well as Barbara Pop Real Estate Services for those that are down in the Southern Indiana, Louisville area. If you're looking for a home down there, you need Barbara Pop Real Estate Services. They have served those communities for over 3 decades. Reach out to Barbara at barbarapop.com or Matt Lincoln, Matt at barbarapop.com. So in the next hour, Zach Osterman will be with us, and we'll get a much more detailed look at Jalen Hood-Schifino's fit with the Lakers, and more importantly, Trace Jackson Davis, because he is going to be working to make a roster this summer in Las Vegas. And he's going to have to prove the naysayers wrong. You know, he sent that tweet out, which last night, that I don't know if that was directed at the Pacers or if that was directed at everybody, that you're going to regret not picking me sooner, yada, yada. He'll certainly get that opportunity to show that. And we'll see how he does. We got to take another break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Zach Osterman. You're listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by our good friends from Remax and Barbara Pop. Back with more right after this. Well, that's no fun doing a show by yourself, especially when you miss a guest by accident or Crickets. Hey, Zach, how are you, brother?
How we doing?
Good. I'm doing all this myself today, so we're just going to come back here about now if you're ready.
Okay.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday. Glad to have you along. Appreciate you being with us. If your week hadn't been too well, guess what? It's over, and you can head toward the weekend. And we've got Zach Osterman to help you get that started. Of course, the IU beat writer from Indianapolis. Am I being as coy as I can, Zach? I started with earlier in the week with Dustin. I was like, okay, I got to try to remember that and abide by the byline. I'm standing by the byline boycott.
I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. I know it's a strange thing, but wish we didn't have to do it. So
yeah, it's unfortunate life. Last night though, the NBA draft has come and gone. Jalen Hood-Schifino, kind of right in that window where we thought he was going to go, somewhere near the lottery, just outside the lottery, which is where he goes to the Lakers in the 17th pick. Looks like a good spot to land. He ends up with playing with LeBron James, which is pretty cool. You get a former Hoosier on the last year's team with Thomas Bryant being traded to the Nuggets, but now Jalen Hood-Schifino starts his pro career in the sunny coast of the southern Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think that was right in the wheelhouse of where we thought maybe, if not lottery, certainly immediately post-lottery, there was a cluster of teams around there, Utah, LA, Atlanta, that you kind of looked at and thought, is a guy like Jalen Hood-Schifino going to be appealing to them? And I tweeted this last night. Rob Pelinka was in the United Center for that game against Maryland in the the Big Ten tournament quarterfinal, I guess. And he was about 5 rows behind press row, and he stayed for the whole game. And, listen, I mean, Rob Pelinka might just want to watch some basketball. He went to Michigan, he played at Michigan. So, Big Ten basketball is kind of his thing. It's in his background. But, GMs don't normally, just hang out for one game that long like that. That's not something you do unless you're serious about a guy. And so when he fell to LA, the other spot I wondered about was Atlanta. But I think with Atlanta, there was just kind of a lot of conjecture that they'd do something with DeJounte Murray. Atlanta wound up taking Kobe Buffkin, which we'll set to one side because as a tortured Hawks fan, I don't really understand why, but we don't have to travel down that personal rabbit hole today. He makes sense for the Lakers is the short of it. And, if you're Mike Woodson, I think one of the first things you tell him is you're gonna be playing next to LeBron James, go out there and soak up everything you can. This is a guy who at various points in his career, you could argue has been the best 1, the best 2, the best 3, and the best 4 in the NBA. I mean, there have been times where he's been arguably the best player at 4 different positions in the league. Go soak up everything you can. And, do what you can to make an impact early, which I think is possible for Jalen Hood-Schifino, certainly.
Absolutely. And he has been readying himself for this moment for a long time. I talked to people about us, everything he has done, how he has trained, his diet. I mean, he uses organic deodorant, everything he has done to train himself to be a professional, and he's ready for this moment.
Yeah, and again, I mean, one of the big selling points for Hood Schifino was the perception of his maturity, and in particular his on-court maturity. I think we talk a lot about the numbers that did so well for him last year, and you look at if you can dig into the synergy stats and how often he was in ball screen actions, how good he was in ball screen actions, which of course is something the NBA really values highly. That goes into it, but I think there's also something to be said. I talked to a couple NBA people earlier in the spring, kind of basically just sort of exchanging information, me maybe looking for, a sense of where some of these guys stood, and them maybe just wanting to know from my perspective, just sort of where Jalen Hood-Schifino kind of fit in the firmament of last season. And one thing that kind of stuck for me in those conversations was that he got better when his team needed him. And that was both in games. You think about that Purdue game where the game plan is essentially just, hell or high water. Trace Jackson Davis does not win this game. And Jalen Hood-Schifino steps in with one of the all-time great individual performances in that rivalry. Or you think about the bigger picture, which is he's a good freshman. He's growing into it. And then when Xavier Johnson breaks his foot, he goes up another level. When his team says we need you at a higher level, he finds it. He goes up. And so, there's kind of it's a little bit of a lot of different things that lead you to a place where he's a top 20 pick, which is not something I think we all could see the NBA potential in him even in high school. Certainly once we started to see him in an Indiana uniform, but I don't think anybody expected this to come this quickly.
Yeah, and how far do you think he is from being able to I don't want to say contribute, but it's hard to just take that step and move up that level without, and that's what part of what the summer league is for, to kind of ease into that transition. But he's probably, how far off do you think he is from being able to contribute to the Lakers as they stand right now?
Well, so if you look at their roster, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they have D'Angelo Russell, who's obviously on big money. So that's kind of that's your unless I'm losing my mind and something's changed, that's your starting point guard. You've got Dennis Schroeder there, who is a longtime veteran. It's also worth saying Dennis Schroeder will be 30 in September. This will be his 10th season. If I'm not mistaken, he's on a pretty low contract number at the moment. I don't know what his contract situation is, and I can look it up while we talk here. But the point is, he's on a 1-year contract. So and I think it's for this season. So the point is, he's probably not, both in age and in contract status, not a long-term part of the plans. And he's, I'm not trying to do him down, but let's also not. He's not necessarily been, the answer by any means. And if anything, you kind of look at a player like Dennis Schroeder, who had a good season last season, but I think you could see sort of a direction of travel where Jalen Hood-Schifino is at minimum doing something like that for you within the next 3 years. Last season, Schroeder had averaged 12.6 points, 2.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists per game. It's, again, Jalen Hood-Schifino is he's younger, he's bigger, he's longer. He's probably got a little more upside in terms of, if you look at Dennis Schroeder has not really ever been a great 3-point shooter. And of course, Jalen Hood-Schifino still has to prove that himself. But, I think with a young guy who's 19, or I think maybe he just turned 20, there's a lot more upside than a guy's going to turn 30 in September. So I think at very least, you're probably talking about a guy that can, be, sort of force his way into that rotation within the next couple years. And I think it's also worth saying, I think a lot of, if you had to classify him positionally, Jalen Hood-Schifino is a point guard, but we've seen him play effectively on the floor with other ball handlers. So there's nothing to say that you can't put Hood-Schifino as he develops and as he adjusts, that you can't put Jalen Hood-Schifino on the floor next to a D'Angelo Russell as an example. And if you just kind of look at the Pacers in general, and I'm not Mr. NBA, like I'm not I don't have all the kind of roster breakdown in my head, but if you look at the Pacers in general, or not the Pacers, sorry, the Lakers in general, there's a number of guys there that, have some combination of either like potential or something kind of proven. You think about like an Austin Reeves, or a Malik Beasley, again, like from a potential perspective, maybe Max Christie falls into that conversation, but it's not like there's somebody that's got some iron fisted grip on that 2 spot. So again, I don't know if you're looking at an immediate impact, Jalen Hood-Schifino starting 78 games next year, that feels maybe a little bit far, but it's not hard for me to see a path if he goes out there and keeps getting better, the way that we saw him obviously this past season. It's not hard for me to see a path to him being, firmly in the rotation, if not in the starting lineup within 2 to 3 years.
Trace Jackson-Davis goes to Golden State. You talk about fits. I saw you had a tweet that this may be just a good landing spot for him, for the opportunity that he needs to show, and for all that has been said about what he needs to do, what he can't do, this, that, and the other thing. All that stuff doesn't matter anymore. It's time. He'll go to Las Vegas and show what he does. He sent that tweet out last night when I don't know if it was generated towards the Pacers for passing on him a couple times or just in general, showing his frustration. But again, I wonder, to me, that goes back to the letter last year. And I'm like, man, that was a little immature to me again. I'm like, dude, stop with that. Just go show it and don't talk about it. I don't know if that was frustration, embarrassment, or what that was, but I can't say I'm surprised by it, but I don't know that that benefits him sending stuff out like that. I think he sets himself up by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I think tweets like that probably aren't going to move the needle too much for anybody. I mean, there's nothing overly controversial in what he said, and you can sort of say, I know what you're saying, and I think you can look at it and say, well, is that really doing any good or whatever? But the flip side is, I don't think it's doing. I don't think they're looking at his Twitter and saying, "Oh no, we wanted him, but now that he's sent out this tweet, no, thank you."
Now, if he can carry that as a chip on his shoulder and use it, that's beneficial.
And the other thing I would say too is, it's really important to remember, like after about, I don't know, the first handful of picks of the second round of most drafts, the second round is a very strange place. There's so much horse trading going on. There's so much there's teams that'll do draft and stash. There's, we saw the Pacers yesterday moving a lot of picks around, basically just because they knew they were not. Sorry, I'm putting my hands on the screen here. They knew they weren't going to have the room on roster to carry more than, I think, 3 rookies. So they had all these draft picks, but they got to do something with them. And you don't want to just sort of surrender that draft capital. You don't just want to throw it away. Draft guys you're never going to use or whatever. So you try to spin it forward to the next draft because you gather that stuff up in case you might want to make a big trade sometime. Well, if no trade ever materializes, then you want to keep some of that capital, the value of that capital going forward. So you just kind of spin it forward by moving it to somebody else in this draft in exchange for something in the next draft. There's all kinds of stuff going on with agents behind the scenes talking to different teams and saying, my guy's a fit here. We would be interested in your setup here, but we wouldn't necessarily be interested in like maybe we'd take a two-way deal over here because we like sort of the system fit and everything, but we really wouldn't take a two-way deal over here. There's so much stuff that happens in the second round of the draft. And what I would say about Trayce Jackson-Davis is I did hear late last night that Golden State was interested in before they picked up that pick. That doesn't necessarily mean that all this was being, engineered and that there was some marionette puppet, that this was all happening. That just means that they were interested in him. At least I'm pretty confident in that. If you look at Golden State's roster, you can understand why. Kevon Looney, I mean, if you're literally just sitting here sorting by size, they got three guys that are taller than 6'7". One of them is J. Michael Green, who's 33 years old. One of them is Patrick Baldwin, who I think was a rookie last year and was not super impactful. Obviously, Draymond Green is always going to be part of that conversation. He opted out. I think we all assume he's probably just trying to manufacture a better deal. But like the point is, beyond Kevon Looney, who's only under contract for 2 more years, that team doesn't have a lot of size. And the Warriors' first pick, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, and I believe I am, Brandon Pajimski, is a guard. He's a shooter. He's from Santa Clara. So it's not like they took, it's not like they were just loading up on size and they took somebody that's immediately going to get in Trayce Jackson-Davis's way either. I think we all know the things that Trayce Jackson-Davis has to prove in the league. I don't think that's, he's got to show a 15 to 17 foot game. He's got to, be probably a little bit more creative offensively because he's so left-hand dominant and he's not that big. He's going to have to prove that, as a let's just be frank with it, probably a slightly undersized 5. He's going to have to prove that the stuff that he was really good at in college, rebounding, shot blocking, what they call sort of second leap or second jump, basically the guy that hits the floor and gets back up the fastest when nobody gets the rebound or when the shot's been altered or whatever. He's very, very good at that. But he's going to have to prove that stuff translates when suddenly he's dealing with larger players. On the other hand, Golden State is a team that is famous for its success with bigs that can pass, with bigs that can handle the ball, with bigs that can, I'm writing something about this later today, so I've already been kind of thinking about a lot of this, with bigs that can, sort of enter a team into its offense. Not all the time, but sometimes. Because when your best shooters are also sometimes your best ball handlers, sometimes it's better to lopside the thing in the other direction and send Steph Curry off the ball and let the big guy be the one that enters the action that gets Steph Curry a shot. Obviously also, and I'm not trying to pick too much fun at Indiana here, but Trayce Jackson-Davis is going to be playing with a team that probably spaces the floor better than anyone he played with in college. So you're going to see maybe a little bit more offensive freedom for him. The telling thing for me is that Mike Dunleavy's already said that Jackson-Davis the plan is to have him on the 15-man roster. So take the number to just remove the number for a moment. Golden State traded into that pick to take Trayce Jackson-Davis, and they've already said that their plan is that he's on roster immediately. There's no summer league, and we'll see how he does. There's no I don't think there's even talk of a two-way. It's just he's part of their plan. And so, okay, fine. Yeah, he slid down from where we expected, but he wound up in a really good system, a really good situation.
And with somebody who truly wanted him, obviously.
By outward appearance, he also wound up with a team that is prepared to really give him an opportunity to really sort of invest some time in maybe polishing some of the rougher areas of his game and to give him an opportunity to get better in what he does well in the league. So
I mean, and it sounds like he ended up in possibly the best scenario that he could have landed.
It's hard to imagine a better one. I mean, it is. And that doesn't mean he's going to be a success. I'm not sitting here and saying, oh, Trace Jackson Davis is the next Draymond Green. I've seen some people saying that, and I understand why, and I understand the comparisons. I wouldn't get too far ahead of myself, obviously. I mean, I mean, if for no reason other than because Draymond Green was already a 36% three-point shooter on 252 attempts coming out of college. But again, listen, if you get outside the top 20 picks, and certainly if you get outside the first round, and there was never any guarantee Trace Jackson Davis was going to be taken in the first round. I think even the most optimistic projections had him at 28, 29, 30. What you want at that point is the promise of an opportunity to not just be picked by a team that is just going to sort of say, well, we like your tools. We're going to dump you in the G League. We'll see how it goes. But a team that is going to say, we believe in this. We believe in you. We're going to invest in you. We're going to give you time. I don't know what his contract status is in terms of, is he going to get a fully guaranteed deal? Again, I don't, my perception is that there's not a two-way's not really on the table right now. I guess maybe a two-way contract is something you can sign for anyone who doesn't know, that basically says you'll spend most of your time in the G League, but your parent club can bring you up for a certain number of days each season. And you can just you basically you can be called up from the G League without them having to make space, purchase your contract, all that kind of stuff. There's a maximum number of days. I think it's 45 maybe in the year that you can be with the NBA team before they have to fully vest your contract and just guarantee it for the whole year. But the point of a two-way is it says that team sees a little bit more value in you than the guys they just put straight into their G League team. My perception is Golden State's not even talking about a two-way here. They're just, in their mind, Trace Jackson Davis is just on the roster at this point.
And let's be honest, most 57th picks don't have that luxury.
A lot of second-round picks, period, don't get that. Certainly don't get that on draft night. They certainly don't. They certainly are not taken in this, again, maybe outside the first 10 picks of the second round in most drafts. Some drafts are deeper, and I get all that. But, most drafts, after maybe the first 8 to 10 picks of the second round, and some of those guys have maybe been given second round guarantees and they're going to get guaranteed contracts and whatever else, you're in a position where realistically, you're just, like I said, you're hoping for the right fit. You're hoping to be taken by a team that has genuine interest in you and a plan for you and an opportunity to present to you, and not just a team that is just sort of like hunting for talent and figuring they can just make up the numbers and, something will bubble up. Because I say this all the time, we look at sports and we think it's science, and we think it's medicine, and we think that the people that run these franchises are often just like so much smarter and think so much further ahead, and they're constantly playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Trust me, there's plenty of franchises out there that really do just think, well, let's just get some talent and see what happens with it. And those are the franchises you don't usually see playing into May and June, obviously. But what you hope for in that sort of situation is just, can I get with a team that has a plan for me and that believes in me and that is going to give me an opportunity? And for all the world, both because of the way he clearly fits what Golden State does, and because of the way Golden State has talked about him as a draft pick since last night, it seems like Golden State is not just taking Trace Jackson Davis on a flyer. They have a plan for him.
And that is the best thing that anybody could hope for. I mean, man, there are guys that in the first round, although they have the security, they don't feel the security that sounds like Mike Dunleavy Jr. is putting into Trace Jackson Davis. Zach Osterman's with us. I don't know if you have time to spend a few more minutes. I wanted to talk to you about a few other things, but I need to take a break if you have a few extra minutes.
Yeah, I can do that. Let me run out here and
all right, we'll be right back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this. without my producer, so I'm just timing my commercial breaks. So
Gotcha.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just want to talk about the Reds and the Braves, man.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me just I literally am just going to go switch my laundry. So give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
Did mine last night.
Don't leave this. Leave that. Oops, whoa.
Oh no, there was one other thing. No, Zach is not a Reds fan. Whoever asked that, he is a Braves fan.
We're back.
Oh, we still have 1 minute.
I
I don't like producing.
One of my prized possessions here, obtained by black market sources, the Outcast Braves bobblehead.
Oh man.
2 dope boys in a Cadillac. So
That's probably hard to find.
No one can get to it.
That's probably hard to find.
Well, they just did it a few weeks ago, but yeah, I was I had to leverage all my clout and had to call in all my favors. So
Gee, that's a lot. All right, about 15 seconds. John's going to be so proud of me. 4, 3, 2. Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday. I hope you had a great week. If not, well, it's time for the weekend, and you can have a great weekend. So we'll get you started there. Zach Osterman with us. We talked about last night's NBA draft, and the Pacers. I know you're not an NBA guy or follow it intently. They had another top 10 pick, only their second top 10 pick since 1989.
yeah, no, they had a long run of double-digit lottery outcomes. Just bad luck.
Unfortunately, but they had last year they had had a better season than a lot of people expected after getting Benedict Mathurin in kind of the same spot, 6th I think he was last year. But man, are they able to move up? There's just I know Doyle did a piece kind of like what I'm saying, but it's like they're trying to inch their way up. And man, I don't know that you can just do that in sports anymore.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult.
And I know that they're in a rock and a hard place, so it's not
right. It's difficult because they keep winding up sort of just outside that area where you can get a potentially sort of like franchise changing player, and often because of the dynamics of the NBA, there's rarely a team that's going to be ahead of you in that circumstance that's going to be willing to move out of that spot because they're going to want that player. It happens more often in a sport like football where you get a team like the Bears that just had a really bad year, but they've got a premium asset at quarterback, and therefore when they wind up with a really high draft pick but they don't need a quarterback, they can start shopping that because they can afford to move out of that spot and let somebody else take whoever they think is the number one quarterback in the draft because they've already got somebody there. Usually teams that wind up drafting, top 4, top 5 don't have that player. And sometimes they do, or sometimes, probably the more common scenario is something like Detroit, where you've got Cade Cunningham, but he was out all season. They struggled a little bit with him in his freshman season, which is fine. And then they took Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duran. And then, Cunningham was out basically like a huge chunk of last season. And so Detroit struggled again. So then they wind up picking high again. But again, it's just sort of like teams don't tend to want to trade out of the top 3, top 4, top 5, even if you've got a ton of picks, even if you want to throw some future picks at them, that kind of thing. Because then the flip side for the Pacers is, well, what do you give up? I know there's been talk about Miles Turner at times, but first of all, what value is Miles Turner, as an example, going to have on a rebuilding team as compared to when we've seen him linked to like the LeBron Lakers or something like that? Second of all, if you're the Pacers, unless you think you're going to get somebody just absolutely game-changing, part of what gives you optimism for the future is that you've got this whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. You may not have one absolute superstar, but you've got 3, 4 guys that are top 10, maybe even top 5 in the league at their position. And so maybe you can eventually build towards something like what Larry Brown had with the Pistons. But then that's sort of like, well, if you trade away Miles Turner, you better be damn sure that the guy that you're going to draft with that pick winds up being whatever position he plays winds up being more impactful than Miles Turner. That the same could be said for, Benedict Mathurin. I think they got stuck in this a little bit with when Malcolm Brogdon was a Pacer, in terms of sort of feeling like, well, he's probably bumping a certain ceiling in terms of his value to us, but is he good enough that somebody else is going to go, is he that valuable to somebody else, basically? And so it's difficult. I mean, it's a tough spot to be in, and it's a tough sport because, listen, it's simplistic, but if we sat down here and we looked at every NBA champion for the last 30 years or whatever, every one of them would have a player that we would consider generational, other than maybe those Pistons. You go and you look through, and I guess possibly the Doc Rivers Celtics, but even then, I think Kevin Garnett is probably that sort of generational talent, even if Ray Allen and Paul Pierce, who have an argument for that, aren't. You need those star level players in that sport, and you always have. That's not a modern construct either. That's not some like, oh, this is only because of AAU basketball or something like that. Like, go back to the 90s. Go look at not just Jordan winning his championships, but who was he playing? He was playing Karl Malone. He was playing Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. He was playing Charles Barkley. Go back to the 80s. It's the Lakers. It's the Celtics. It's the Pistons. Like, these are, you have always needed that star power that you could build around in basketball, because there's 5 players on the floor for each team. So if one of them is just head and shoulders above everybody else, it's going to make an enormous difference.
Indiana basketball has an open scholarship, and it looks to me more and more like that just may be the result of that. Might just leave that open in this era where you don't really want to. If it's not a transfer, a one-year guy, you don't really want to use that scholarship up. I wonder if that had something to do with whether or not Joey Hart ended up at Indiana. Being someone I see is probably a 3-4 year guy, maybe, but it looks like they're just going to leave that spot open, possibly.
Yeah, I think there's a decent chance, and I think I was never sure how serious Indiana got with Joey Hart. And listen, if I'd been advising Joey Hart, I would have said go to Kentucky. Like, their need is far greater right now than Indiana's, given their roster situation. But I think it does feel like nothing really more has materialized. I think, you think back to right about a month ago when we talked to Mike Woodson down at Huber, and his message was, if the right player's there, we'll pursue him. I think at the time they were waiting to see kind of what dripped down out of the NBA draft. It seemed, obviously all that is, of course, settled out by now. And it does look increasingly like Indiana may just leave that spot open. And I don't, I think it's clear that Indiana wanted to fill that spot. So I'm not going to sit here and say Indiana's better for not having that player. But I don't think Indiana needs to force that. I don't think they've got such glaring need that they need to force sort of what they're doing there. I do think that you need to have a very clear idea of what you can expect. Let's presume Trey Galloway starts there. What you can expect from the players that need to complement around him. For example, you're going to need Gabe Cupps to play 15, 20 minutes a night because you cannot ask Xavier Johnson to be your primary point guard and then Trey Galloway to be your secondary point guard, and then those two play together, all the time. That's not realistic. Guy gets foul trouble, guy gets hurt, whatever. You're going to need Cupps to spell Johnson off the bench and basically allow Galloway to not have to play a lot of point guard, other than maybe when you want to put the ball in his hands to get him actions going at the rim, because we know in certain matchups he can be really good driving at the basket, that little teardrop floater he has and his ability to finish. I think you need to be able to lighten some combination of the scoring load with maybe a CJ Gunn or a Ja'Kai Newton, or if you wanted to play bigger, a Caleb Banks. And the defensive load, insofar as Trey Galloway is one of your best on-ball defenders, certainly one of your best wing defenders at the moment, at least. But if you're asking him to go be the best defender on the floor, it's going to be hard to ask him to be the best shooter on the floor or the best scorer on the floor because he's putting so much energy in on defense. And you're going to have a conversation about if he's our starting two and we need to maybe get to a place where he can comfortably average 8 to 10 points a game, 8-9 points a game. And I think that's, in a best case scenario, or not even best case, but an ideal scenario, your leading scorers this season are going to be Xavier Johnson and Mackenzie Mbako, maybe one of Kalel Ware or Malik Renew. You don't need to look at Trey Galloway and say, get us 15 points a game. But you do need, it is equally true that he was substantially more productive and efficient last year than he'd ever been at any point in his career. And also that those numbers need to go up again if he's going to be an effective starting two guard. And then you have the whole conversation about defense being, well, if we're going to rely more on him for minutes, for points, for shooting, then he can't get in foul trouble. And we need him to be, for example, he shot, I think, 47.2%. That number is stuck in my head. Last season in Big Ten play, he was 46.2 over. He was 46.2 overall. He was 47.1 in Big Ten play, and it's worth saying that 51 of his 65 attempts last season came in conference play. So actually, he was taking about 2.5 threes a game in conference play, as compared to right at about 2 threes a game overall. So he's shooting more in conference play is my point. What you need from him is to take that 65 total attempts up to like 110, 115, and he can lose some efficiency. He doesn't have to shoot 46%, but if he could give you 120 attempts at 39%, that's, that helps. But then again, you go back to this conversation. I'm kind of rambling in this argument here, but you go back to the conversation of, well, then he can't get in foul trouble. If he's going to be one of our primary off-ball scoring options, shooting options, he can't get in foul trouble. And so what you've got to be certain on, if you're Mike Woodson, is not just that he can do it, but that you've also got the pieces to put around that backcourt of Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway, such that you're not asking either of those guys, frankly, to do too much, or you're not putting yourself in a position where if one of them gets hurt or if one of them gets in foul trouble because of the way you try to defend, suddenly you're out of options or you're out of answers. So that's going to be one where I think how the roster develops around him is going to be very important.
Yeah, for me, Galloway, he doesn't have to look to score more, but he has to take more advantage of the opportunities that are presented him, because I think he passed up too many of those last year, but not forced opportunities, but opportunities that were there. But he did a better job of contributing, taking those shots, and people wanted to see him shoot more. Let's see. The Reds and the Braves. This is a series that this may be the most looked upon series in this, not in baseball this year, but right now. Heck, the Reds have won 11 straight. The Braves have won 8 straight. This
this is setting up for a very, very exciting and important series, although it's not divisional. It's pretty important for the Reds to me because they can make a statement. They don't have to keep the streak going, but they need to win the series, I think, to show that, hey, this is for real. But the Braves that's not going to be an easy task, man.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously
I didn't mean to. I should have set this up. Zach is a big Braves fan.
Yeah, I grew up in Atlanta, and I was during the break. I was showing Jim my Outcast Braves bobblehead, prized possession up on the shelf up there. But it's been a funny year for the Braves. Like I would not. And it's funny, like I always get MLB TV in a way that I never do Sunday Ticket or NBA League Pass, and it's basically just because I have time to watch games this time of year. Like I'm already so busy and so tied up in the fall and winter that I'm not going to have the time to sit down and watch enough Hawks games to make League Pass worth it, Or certainly, I'm not going to. My marriage would not survive if I out of my wife all day every Saturday in the fall, and then said, "Oh, and by the way, the Falcons game's at 1:00 Sunday, so I'll just be in front of the TV for 3.5 hours for that one." Send the boys in if they're bored. The Braves have some really crucial injuries in their starting rotation. Max Fried is out. Kyle Wright is out. Spencer Strider has not been quite as good as we thought he would be. The bullpen has gotten a lot better. And in the aggregate, I think that's one of the best ERAs in baseball. But even some of the most reliable dudes in that bullpen, like AJ Minter and Raisel Iglesias, have had, more than one kind of meltdown this season. Iglesias actually – just last week, the Braves went, or was it maybe 2 weeks ago, the Braves went 6-1, and their only loss, they were leading by 3 runs going into the 9th inning in Detroit, one of the worst teams in baseball, and Iglesias blew the save and lost the game. So it has felt like the Braves are not clicking on all cylinders, and yet the one thing they are doing is just mashing everyone. Like, they are hitting everyone. They are killing left-handed pitching at a level that I have not seen, this team do in a really long time. They lead the National League in runs scored, and like the only team that's even close to them is Arizona. They have 404 runs scored. They're also the only team with a run differential over plus 100, and nobody else is better than plus 46. I'm looking at these numbers right now. I swear I don't know these things right off the top of my head, but you said you want to talk about this, so I looked it up. The Dodgers are at plus 46. That's the second best run differential in the National League. Again, they had a weird year because they started like 15-3 on the road and like 7-7 at home, but those two records have kind of evened out as the season's gone on. They've won 8 in a row. I think, you mentioned, the sort of colliding streaks here. I think I saw a stat that it's only like 5 or 6 times, since the turn of the century that two teams with win streaks this long have met in the regular season. If you look at FanGraphs playoff odds, they have the Braves at almost 96% to win their division, and I think they give the Braves the best playoff odds or the best World Series odds in baseball, even better than the Rays, even better than the Rangers, who I think have a slightly better run differential, but the Braves actually beat the Rangers in 2 or 3 down in Arlington earlier this season. So it is quite possibly the best lineup I've ever seen in Atlanta. The other big comparison would be 2003, when they had Gary Sheffield, Chipper Jones, Andrew Jones, very deep lineup. But this one is just like it. I'm almost certain it leads baseball in OBP. It's going to break, unless just something craters, it is going to break the single season record for most home runs over 450 feet. You've got Ronald Acuna, who is on pace anyway for the first 30-60 season in history. Ozzie Albies, I believe, still leads all of baseball in RBIs. I think Matt Olson is second in the league in homers. It's a much more balanced lineup than what they had last year, largely because of Albies. Albies was injured for a lot of last season, and he's a switch hitter, and so they wound up getting a little bit too right-hand heavy. But now, because they can move Albies around the lineup and he can hit from either side of the plate, they can go much more sort of right, left, right, left, right, left. And then you've even got a guy like Marcell Ozuna, who obviously, people can understand kind of his off-the-field past. But on the field, the Braves had kind of persisted with him. And, I mean, he's hit something like 14 home runs already this season and really kind of turned around his swing as a DH from a guy who was just frankly like a bit of a black hole production wise, especially if you looked at his advanced numbers, the WRC plus, his his expected batting average and his WOBA and things like that. It's even a guy like that or a guy like Orlando Arcia, who nobody really expects. I mean, he's probably going to be an all-star replacing Dansby Swanson, who we spent all the offseason talking about. Will the Braves bring Swanson back? Will they sign one of the other big shortstops? And instead they've got Arcia, who I think Baseball Reference had it about 2.5 wins above replacement already this season the other day. So it really is. I do mean that it's as good of, and let's get to the end of the season and see what it accomplishes, but it is certainly as good of a Braves lineup as I've ever seen. And the Rockies are terrible, but they just swept the Rockies in 4 games at home last weekend, and they scored something like 55 runs in 4 games. I mean, they just pounded them. But when they need to, they can pitch. And I think the Reds will get AJ Smith-Shawver, who's a rookie, and then I think Charlie Morton and Spencer Strider this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. So it'll be, I don't know. It'll be interesting, man. I mean, the Braves obviously have this whole thing of like they've won all these division titles and only a couple World Series. My argument is always basically how many franchises would take 20-something division titles and 2 World Series, in the last 50 years. I bet a lot of them would. But
are the Braves the Purdue Boilermakers of Major League Baseball?
No, actually, I will have this argument with anybody, and I can tell you the backstory if we've got time. I don't know how long the show runs.
Absolutely, man.
I will argue the Braves are the most culturally relevant National League franchise in the Eastern Time Zone. And that probably used to be like the Reds or the Pirates, but obviously, those franchises have faded as they've sort of been outspent. I agree with you. For example, the Braves have the second largest radio network in the country behind the Cardinals. They have more division titles than any other team in baseball history. And that's a number that kind of means something now. We've been doing that since the 60s. So like we've been doing that long enough that it doesn't sort of feel like, we only started tracking block shots in 1985, something like that. If you
do they have Ted Turner to thank for all this?
Yes. Yes, they do. Putting him on TBS.
He's the guy.
Putting him on TBS, obviously eventually putting the money in that builds a winner, but building a fan base for that team or in the South and elsewhere. I mean, watch a Braves Diamondbacks game. Even when the D-backs are good, it'll be half Braves fans, and I mean, when they won the World Series in Game 6 in Houston, again, go on YouTube right now. You don't have to. I don't expect anybody to actually do this. This is just the sort of thing I do when I'm killing time. You can find the whole 9th inning of Game 6 of the 2021 World Series on YouTube, and you can hear. And again, we can have a conversation about whether or not people find it, unsavory or offensive. I'd be fine if the tomahawk chop went away tomorrow, to be very clear. But you can hear it in what is supposed to be one of the toughest road environments in all of baseball. And okay, I get it. It was 7-0. They were about to win the World Series. Astros fans had left or checked out. But like after the game's over, they set up the little stage where they present the trophy. And there's probably 5,000-6,000 Braves fans that all come flooding down to the main concourse at Minute Maid Park or whatever it is now. I don't know if it's still Minute Maid Park, but it's just like it. The Braves are not the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Cardinals, the Dodgers, or the Giants. But I would argue they're a lot closer to those franchises than
they're more like Duke of
Yeah.
kind of like Duke, without the national championships, but because Duke's relevance didn't start and really until the 90s, the early 90s, like 91. Yeah, they went to a Final Four in 78, but I mean, boom, that run with Krzyzewski started. UConn, everything they've done has been in a 24-year capsule,
Well,
but the
and think
Braves
about
have been doing it for like 30 years now.
Think too about like who, the Braves, who's on your all-time Braves team.
That's an all-star team.
I mean, your outfield is Hank Aaron, Andrew
God.
Jones, and Ronald Acuna, probably, or Dale Murphy if you don't want to use modern guys. Or
look at your pitching staff. You've got a freaking Hall of Fame pitching staff.
You've got to pick at third base between Eddie Matthews, who hit 512 home runs, most of them in Milwaukee. If we're using Milwaukee guys, which I think you should be allowed to, most of them in Milwaukee, which is not as hitter-friendly a park as what Atlanta Fulton County proved to be. Or you're picking maybe the third best switch hitter of all time in Chipper Jones. At first base, probably Freddie Freeman, who's going to end his career with 400 home runs and is probably going to go into the Hall of Fame. Yeah, you look at the pitching staff. I mean, you're picking from Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz, Spahn. I mean, Warren Spahn won 350 games. He has over 100 wins above replacement. I think people forget that, but like you've got Phil Niekro. You can even do a diddle where you throw John Smoltz in the bullpen because he was one of the dominant relievers for about 5 years, and bring in somebody like Jim Hudson, who won over 200 games in the major league. So, again, it's one of those where if you sit down and think about it, and the origin of all this is my good friend Ralph Russo, who is one of the lead, or maybe the lead, college football writer for the Associated Press, is from New York, and he grew up a Mets fan. And you can get trapped in your own little bubble of, my team has all these problems, and everyone else's team, all I ever do is see them win because I'm not really paying attention. And I think this was Big Ten Football Media Day in July of 2021. So before the Braves had started the turnaround that eventually ended in them winning the World Series. And the Mets had led the division for most of that season, but had never really put together a run to pull away. And I was talking to Ralph about it. And by this point, Ronald Acuna had injured his knee, so he was out for the year. And Ralph was like, yeah, but the Braves just figure it out. They're one of those franchises that just they're too good at what they do. They call up some rookie and he hits. They make the trade that no one else makes, and this guy comes in and rakes. He's just like, he just said, like, there is just a winning culture around that franchise that the rest of the East has just not been able to replicate consistently. And it was just funny to hear that from somebody who doesn't look at the Braves through the lens of, oh, well, they the closer's terrible and the bottom half of the lineup, is inconsistent and they need another starter, but looks at the Braves in the round and just says, like, the team that always, in the same way that everybody in the NL Central looks at the Cardinals and just says, most years, if somebody's just going to figure it out, it's going to be them, because there's a culture of that franchise getting it right. And obviously that's not going to happen this year, I don't think. But
Atlanta's the most consistent franchise in the National League to me. I mean, they've done it for too long.
I mean, the Dodgers are probably higher up there, and certainly in recent times. And again, if you're talking about cultural agency, the Dodgers and the Giants, they've been around so long. And if you go back to their days in New York, if you think about like the all-time, Giants team, I mean, that's you got Barry Bonds and Willie Mays in the outfield. I mean, that's incredible. But it's just kind of, if you really sit down and think about it, and even like the whole sort of 14 division titles, but only one World Series thing, we can pick the bones out of that all day long. The reality is winning your division 14 straight seasons is incredibly difficult.
In a professional sport is unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what Kansas did in basketball was pretty, to me, it's still mind-boggling in this day and age, winning the Big 12, 14 times straight. But to do it in a professional sport, that's just unheard of. Matt Taylor's on with us each Thursday, and he talked about each year the average is that there are 4 teams that make the playoffs that did not make the playoffs the year before, and that happens year after year. But
the one thing constant in Major League Baseball are the Braves. But I hope they go down tonight, though, baby. I hope they lay down like a cheap blanket. But we'll see. They look like they're in good shape because the Reds are throwing Luke Weaver, and he's got a 6.5 ERA. So hope he can get that under control. But, man, I can't thank you enough for sticking in here a little extra today. I really, really appreciate you and enjoy watching the series this weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me as always, Jim. Happy to hang around a little longer.
Zach Osterman, make sure you give him a follow and keep up with all things that he covers. Follow him on Twitter. And we'll be back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this. Well, I didn't start the clock soon enough, but I'll just have to guesstimate. Well, it's a lot easier to do it when you got somebody to talk to. Thanks, Fred. Geez. That's going to be a very short break. John's going to not like me. That's okay. That's what happens when he's not here, right? Guys, thank you very much. We're in break right now, but I should have been doing this the whole way. Damn, yes, I should have said this earlier because probably a few people are listening to this one. But Never Lose Hoop, July 20th. You can go to golfstatus.com, golfstatus.events.com for we have our own site now at Never Lose Hoop. For those of you that listen, wherever you are, I would love to see how many whole sponsors we can get. It's only $100. And last year you get your name on the sign, on the hole. And it took us a long time to get this done for last year's, but I have them. I have the pictures of like Forrest. Appreciate you. He sponsored a hole last year. I think Pete sponsored a hole last year as well. I've got those pictures, guys, and I will get them to you. But that's another thing. We want to see how many hole sponsors we can get this year. So just let me know. $100. We'll get your the Jordan holes and maybe who else we can get holding up your sign. But I've got to get those pictures out to you guys. And come play. I want Fozan. I know he's not listening now probably, but I want to get a whole sponsorship from Amon Jordan. There you go. The furthest away whole sponsorship. Who can that be? That would be cool. Oh, that would be awesome to have your name and where you're from on the whole sponsorship. Kent, thank you, brother. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate everybody. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Kent. Thank you, Forrest. Thank you, Andrew. Zach knows, Zach's just good. Appreciate you, Forrest. Forrest sponsored a hole last year. And I have your picture, Forrest. Finally got those. All right. Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Friday. I hope it's been a good one for you. I hope you had a great week. And now you can head out and have a great weekend. I want to thank Alec Busse for joining us from thehoosier.com. Make sure you go to thehoosier.com. They have a special right now, so get signed up there for complete coverage on the Indiana Hoosiers and all things Big Ten. Big thanks to Zach Osterman as well. But most importantly, thanks to you guys. Without you, we've got no reason to be here. On Monday, John Boyd will be back, so I won't be so hectic being here. It's not as fun when you don't have those that you like to have near you. take care of things. It makes things go run so much smoother. But very, very fortunate to have a great lineup of guests this week, man. It was so much fun. Coach Tom Crean was on with us, so another great week. If you missed any of the broadcast, you can always go back and catch them on YouTube, whether it's the segments, individual segments, or the entire show. You can catch it however you like. But I can't thank you guys enough, man. You guys are awesome. Look forward to seeing you again on Monday. So until then, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.